Hey everybody, we are back here for another half of the show. If you are watching this on YouTube, you stumbled across it, there is a whole nother hour before this if you want to check it out. But for the rest of everybody that's watching us live here on Twitch, which you can do every Sunday at twitch.tv/theoryforge, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, you can catch us live right now and participate in questions and all the live discussions going on, so which is one of the areas we try and hit in our second half of the show. So we'll have that here, and definitely tune in live to participate in that in the future. But thanks everybody for sticking through the intermission here. We are going to move on to our next set of topics for the show, which is the great grand studio tour I got to go to, and I tried to share as much of that as I could with you guys. Definitely hard to get all the, I'm a writer, I'm not a video editor, so getting all the video, that was a lot for me. So I hope I got enough of that for you guys to chew on for the week, for a couple weeks. So and I'll be writing some more as I kind of let all this information saturate. But we're gonna kind of hash out some of the video interviews that I did, and also too I'd like to touch in a little bit on the written interview I did with Snipe Hunter. That was a long 3-part series that I'll get the link and drop that in a minute here. But that was a pretty big one too, if you guys are curious about Revival just in general, or some very specific. I tried to ask a few very specific questions, and I got some probably more specific than I was expecting answers back too. So definitely check that out. But we'll go ahead and I'll pass it over to we'll go to Sailkite first, and go ahead and pick a video first, and maybe talk about something that you liked that you saw from it, and then we'll just kind of flow out from there.
Okay, Charlie Rose. Okay, picking a video. Oh man, I mean, I guess. All right, so we'll start with Kedron. His was first in the article. I don't know if his is chronologically first, but I mean, he's technically the highest, hierarchically.
He definitely wasn't first, because he is hierarchy, and he was so busy. Like, I pretty much, as soon as I found out that he had a moment free, that we kind of shuffled some stuff to get him in the middle. So, and you could probably tell I was more comfortable by that point talking. I believe Ombos was the first one we recorded, so I was still trying to find my get settled there. Still not used to being on camera. Believe it or not, it's a little bit different when you're recording some permanent thing. I mean, Twitch is more casual, but for an official video interview, it seems a lot more pins and needles. Not too much, but a little. Sorry, I kind of derailed you there. Keep going. Kedron's video.
It's fine. So we'll start with Kedron, right? So we got to sort of begin sort of the general history now in a couple places of at least Revival in relation to Ilphonic and Kedron's role as a founding member of Ilphonic and things like that. So, but then of course, I mean, towards the end, it starts touching on some of the more interesting, or at least to him more kind of stimulating potentials that Revival will bring with it, right? I mean, I remember you asked him which stage he's most looking forward to, right? And stage 3, I think, is sort of the hallmark. I mean, we'll take anything we can get before that, but I mean, I know for myself at least, I mean, I'm excited for everything past stage 6 too, but and every other stage, but stage 3 being where things really have the chance to just come straight to life and such. Though, if you don't mind, I actually have a question for you, which is, I mean, so he's sort of, Kedron is sort of a founder of this vision, right? So I mean, what is it like hearing him talk about this project? I mean, there's only so much a camera can do, but being in the room with the guy, right? I mean, what's it like hearing him talk about this thing that really is, the thing he's wanted to make for a very long time?
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah, put it on a Dave Georgeson spectrum.
I don't know if we can do a Dave Georgeson spectrum. That's kind of another dimension. We might have to get killed and go into anime's realm before we can touch that. But definitely, I'll tie into the not just the kind of the portion I had with him right when we did the interview, shortly before and after, but definitely, when he first came out to meet me and started. He actually gave me the initial tour himself of the different areas of Ilphonic Studios, and took me into the corner Revival room that was tiny, but you could see like they were just at it in there. But yeah, hearing Kedren talk, you can definitely get the enthusiasm, and the one thing I would note too is that he rambles a little bit, but it's all purposeful rambling, and in all of his rambling too, like behind that enthusiasm and everything, there's a seriousness you can kind of feel off him, where he knows what he's talking about. Like when he mentions that he's worked on games in the past and everything, and he doesn't like the way the industry kind of does things nowadays, or kind of the way money flows and stuff like that. There's a seriousness to, where you can understand why he would go to the trouble to say, what, I'm going to do my own studio, and he got with some partners to do that. And, you can easily see how something like Revival, that he's been wanting, finds a way to happen. They don't really have, they don't have the proper funding to do this the way other game developers do it, or where they just, okay, let's plan out the whole game, let's go all in on this. And I mean, they are doing all of that, but they had to be really clever about it, which I think was a good thing, because in the way they've done it, they had to be. It's kind of like Tony Stark in the cave in Afghanistan, from the popular movie. That's not accurate with the comics, but for the purpose of this, I won't get into my comic book. Sorry, derailed. But he had to be creative. He had to. When you get stuck in those situations where you have to be inventive, to kind of survive or to kind of do the things that you want to do, I think that really inspires the best out of a lot of things. So I feel like them having some more restrictions on how they could actually deploy Revival, how they could develop it, that caused them to really think outside the box. And what they came up with was, an invention. It was an innovation. And I think even when I was talking to Kedren at one point in the video, he mentions, they feel like they're really onto something, because this is brand new territory for them as well. So, and you can get that, you can feel that anytime you're talking to him. You can feel that he's serious about it, he's excited about it, and that it's more than just being, a gamer, a fan of games and playing games and creating games. It's more about not just that, but having a passion for pushing gaming in general forward. Not just experiencing what's there and making something you like, but actually pushing gaming towards new heights. So, and I'm not sure exactly how old Kedren is, but definitely he's got this youthful energy about him, but at the same time he feels wise, old enough and wise enough to be paying attention to some of the nuances of things, and looking, thinking about it smartly. So it's a really good balance where he's at right now, and I think that it's doing really well for Revival so far. And I think I mentioned in the bottom of that interview, it kind of reminds me of I was in the early beta for League of Legends with Riot Games, and this has a similar feel to it. I mean, totally different, obviously, genre game and all that, but just the way the studio is interacting with the players, the fans, and kind of the mindset that they're coming from reminds me in a lot of ways of Riot Games. Riot saw something they liked, we're just going to make this into a game, and it kind of, and they became a kind of a cult icon of rapidly growing, and now League of Legends is one of the biggest games ever. I think that Revival has that potential. Obviously that's super early to say anything like that, but it's coming from the same soup. It's coming from the same mindset. So I think that's exciting for me, somebody watching kind of the meta of what all the different game industries are doing as well as I can. There's so many these days, it's hard to follow, but I feel like they have this this untapped potential that they're tapping into as much as they can afford to and have the time for, because after all, it is a business. You have to make money. They're working on other projects to fund this, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my long little rant about my interview with Kedren, and kind of what I get from him, what I feel from him compared to how I talk to other developers and different things, and specifically to what you were asking, Diggs, for the Dave Georgeson spectrum. I feel like there's similar personalities, except I feel like Kedron is more about, the creative force in a game. He's not so much about like explaining it to you in a way that you can understand. He's just so passionate about actually making it that he's going to let, when the marketing time comes, he's going to let those guys do it that he trusts, guys or girls, because I feel like he's just really into making this happen, which I feel like Dave was kind of more on the spectrum of, it's also my job to sell this to people, and he was passionate about it, but he had that salesman aspect. And I feel like Kedron's a lot more just direct, like exactly what he's saying is kind of exactly what you feel about it. So that's kind of what I would say as far as that. I think a lot of our audience has been following Theory Forge and us talking about EverQuest Next, so that might be a helpful comparison. So, but yeah, go ahead, continue on.
Well, I'll say that there's a couple things that I really liked about Kedron's video. I liked when he was like, screw NDA, we don't care about NDA, steal our stuff, it's going to be different anyway. You can't do what we do. You can come close, but we're going to be different, so we don't care about NDA. And that's great for us because, again, we get so much information just on the forums, just through the blogs every week. But the other thing that Kedron's interview had me thinking about, I'm going to blow up some hype that might not really be possible, but he mentions that they might get the multiplayer aspect, not the multiplayer per se, not the online part really, but that we might be able to get into people's houses, not walking around the city maybe, but we may be able to get into other people's houses early, which is cool. I'm hoping for that so I can see how people are decorating and kind of what their, grill them for what their ideas are behind the reasons they decorated the way they did. But I'm wondering if it might be possible, once that's doable, if we could get into some of these shops that are in the city. I mean, we don't have to walk around the city on the outside, but it'd be nice to see what, the Argent Needle looks like on the inside. And I don't know what the mechanism is going to be for us to visit the inside of these houses, but even if they just, put, a new store online every couple of weeks or something like that, that could be just whenever they're ready, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not necessarily putting a time limit on it, but they could do that one by one instead of waiting for all of them to be ready.
Yeah, so you're saying getting a sneak peek at the NPC buildings that aren't necessarily player out, that would be very interesting. Yeah, it's kind of funny that you brought that up. I had a feeling it would come up at some point, but as I'm learning more as I have more time with 10 Ton Hammer, but I don't have a journalist background, so but there I definitely already, when you get in an interview and you get those drops of information where you're like, okay, wow, I know nobody has heard this before, this is brand new. It's pretty exciting. I was glad that he, and as a journalist, you try and, maybe design some questions to get something. I actually, that one I was not expecting to get anything like that, or I wasn't even trying to get something like that. It was kind of cool that he mentioned that is something, and that's one thing that I think is awesome, where I said as far as, him being just really direct and straightforward about things, because he basically says in that interview, we kind of already have this working, so if we have it working, if we're going to let you guys in your houses, why not let other people in there with you, and I think that can actually be,
well, since it's working, I think they weren't expecting it to be working so soon, but
yeah, and it's important for a game like this, because I think we've touched on it many times before, but the fact that Revival is about immersion and role-playing is, becoming much more valuable. Being able to actually get in the game with other people even before the game's even ready and just start doing things, interacting, exploring people's houses, building storylines, backstories, different things like that is, can be a fun thing for people to do while they wait for the game to get further along. So I thought it was a really awesome piece of information that myself, as a role player, I know the Astrarium Guild is probably pretty excited about that aspect, because we may be able to dive in and start exploring some in-game role-playing super early on, which would be really fun and a great diversion while we're waiting for this to get to a further stage.
We'll have the super crappy temp characters, but that's okay. I just want to see what people are doing. I don't care what the characters look like yet.
Well, I think that the plan is for them to have like all the basics of like kind of what they're waiting for. A lot of it is for them to have the character create thing kind of ready before this goes off, so that way you'll actually get a lot of your character create done before this. I mean, maybe not the backstory and stuff. I know they are still writing that out a lot, but from what I heard, the appearance-wise and stuff like that, they want to try to get most of that ready before we go into our houses. I'm not sure. That's what it seemed like to me when I was there this week.
They said in the in one of the last live streams they did, they showed off the this is temp. It's got a big stamp on it. It's crap.
Yeah, that is. While they're waiting for this, because I believe they're working on it like right now. Like they're working on the character stuff. I'm not sure. They'll chime in, I'm sure, in the chat and say what their plan is. Hopefully that would be helpful, because I think the information may have changed recently. Because from what I got when I was there was that character creation is something they want to have kind of done for even this earliest stages of get in. Because I know they have to have it before.
I asked, and they said,
"Oh, okay.
That just go for temp for now." But who knows what stuff can change. What was true last week or a couple of weeks ago, they could have gotten again farther along than what they thought they would. So, but I don't care.
Definitely,
it's getting into the house. I was thinking it was going to be without a character. So I don't. If you can have a character in there, that's good too. Icing on the cake.
So speaking of, since we were kind of getting into character create and backstory and all that stuff getting worked on, what about Ambwa's interview, my interview with Chris Holtorf? What did you guys get from that one? Any initial thoughts from it, or what?
First thing that comes to mind for me was his love of creating the Pantheon. One of the things that I just love about the Pantheon is tying it into astrology, the stars, getting an idea of who might be influencing the world based on whether they are appearing in the sky or not appearing in the sky. There's going to be so much tie-in with the gods being active, the gods having actual roles, not roles, but actual objectives and goals, and them being able to influence what we're doing in game. That's a lot of what I'm looking forward to, lore-wise.
Yeah, actually, to jump in really quick on that, it wasn't until after after I'd done the interview and I kind of went back and watched it again, kind of pairing all of everything Snipe Hunter's been talking about between my written interview with him and the video interview. When I think back on the interview I had with Ambwa, and he went into the detail about creating the Pantheon and assigning things to particular deities or figuring out what they would influence in the world, it kind of made me think that just like whaling, just like some of these other systems, each of these really important gods will be a system that is a standalone type thing that's out there that different things in the world can interact with, and that's why we will have specific attributes or variables, because those attributes, anytime something out there with certain tags or anytime something out there in that has that particular tie, that god is going to be tied into the world through that through that ley line of influence, I guess. So that's kind of what stood out to me when I started taking what Ambwa was saying and kind of picturing it mechanically about how it's going to work based on the other systems they talked about, which this is kind of just speculation on all speculation on my part, but it sounds like kind of one of the ways that they may be accomplishing that. So it's fun to think about nonetheless. So even if it's not, I don't know, Snipe can definitely chime in the chat on if that's kind of the approach they're taking, because that would be kind of a cool way to understand how things are working mechanically without giving away too much of what you're doing in the game.
Yeah, I apologize. I must have blacked out like at the very start of this video, because I can't remember a lot of it. I apologize. My fan sense must have completely overtaken me, and I went to like a berserker rage of fanboyism. But yeah, I mean, it's I like the gods of system thing, because it ties into something I wanted to talk about, with regards to actually the Kedron and Snipe Hunters interviews as well, which is that a lot of the mindset, like development mindset here, seems to basically be like, one of realization and like what if. I can't think of a better way to say that, but like, I mean, if you think about sort of the development history that Snipe Hunter and Envoy have from Rift, that a lot of their ideas for Revival started in Rift, right? But were never realized. They're like, hey, what if we use this system like this? And there's very much a sandbox at play, not just in the world that's being created, but in also the development of that world. It's like, hey, we can make this sandcastle, have a war with this sandcastle. Well, I mean, I'm looking for something more meta, and I'm not finding it off the top of my head. But there's a lot of option there. Well, not option, but the potential there for discovering new things, for instance, that could be done with the gods, right? Like realizing, oh wait, hey, like we have this god that sort of amounts to this stuff, pluralistically. Then there's a potential here, further down the line when things are sort of concretized and realized that like it could also do this, right? And then you have a whole few months of potential storyline relating to this one entity or deity, written almost for you, right? And you just need someone to like flesh it.
Yeah, another thing that I kind of like piggybacking off of that, and the concept of the gods' influences as these type of modular piece systems that are going to be affecting the whole game at large. It really, understanding that will definitely lead into, if you're a particular organization in the world and you're trying to influence it, understanding somewhat of those systems is going to help you kind of figure out what areas, what buttons to push, what things to poke to kind of move the world towards the direction you want. And at the same time too, if you're somebody that's actually diving really deeply into the occult, the magic, and all all the forbidden things of actually like contacting these devastating deities and these horrors, like you'll have an idea of, when you're pursuing these things, all the different things that you're going to be affecting, what's going to be happening in the world because of what you're doing, and also what you may be doing in your everyday life that will have ties specifically towards the deities that you want to do. And I think also too, the blogs that we discussed, the Mercenary blog and the Standing Points blog especially, where they talked about the different protections and stuff that are tied to specific deities, I think lend itself right back into that that train of thought of this deity has effect on these things, so you need to go to this deity for these kinds of protections, for these kinds of influences. And I think we're going to naturally start understanding where things go. But I definitely, one thing that I always want to kind of point out, to just like reminding people, the one thing that I don't like about a lot of MMO games today is that they're games of complete information, especially once you get into the realm of World of Warcraft and you have all these plugins that can provide you all kinds of this information that the game UI doesn't generally give you. You generally are playing a game of complete information, which in game development terms, that's a type of game where the players have full awareness of everything that's going on, and they're playing the game with knowledge of that. Whereas in Revival, it's going to be a game of incomplete information. There's going to be disguises, hidden tags, all these things. So even though we may know what a god does, where he has influence, what organizations are doing what, just the incomplete information is what, that's really the factor, I think, that makes this game that unpredictable thing, just as much as the evolving world of things moving on their own. That is a pretty interesting element. So I mean, and that kind of goes directly into Snipe Hunter's video of the video interview with him, where and the written interview where he talked about a ton of different systems. the weather was a big one that was discussed, like the weather and temperature in the written one, and I think he brought that up again as another example in the video interview of how things are going to be unpredictable, and also too your general way of doing things is going to have to change and adjust, with the world that's changing. You can't pick the same fighting stance or the same gear that you would normally run around in if you're going to a exotic location or something like that. So I think that's all really interesting stuff. Yeah, but go ahead. I mean, people have seen me talk plenty this week between these interviews and things. So you guys go for it. Dive in on what you're thinking.
Yeah. So with the Snipe Hunter's interview, I mean we've heard it from him before, but he stated it nicely there that as far as really large scale plot occurrences go, that they want players to ultimately be the spark in the pan for getting things going in for the really big meaningful happenings, right? And it's, what do I want to say here? I mean, I like it, right? There's a criticism, not a criticism, but just a reaction to this floating in my head, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it work and render it. But I mean, it's I'm lost. Either way, I'll give an example, and then I'll sort of let this float out, however it goes. So, for instance, if you were to say that there's going to be a big thing going on with Yog-Sothoth, right, somehow, or some sort of cataclysm thing going on with Yog-Sothoth, right, that will threaten a large number of people, or the status quo for a large number of people, and then either by their own invention or by finding it in the world or by prompts from the ST, following of players gathers around the idea that the stars and the night sky is actually a manifestation of Yog-Sothoth, right? And then there's this small little intellectual thing that happens there with a couple people just kind of grandstanding and philosophizing and whatever, and English, and doing whatever it is that they technically do, right? And just making this little book on a potential theory that's maybe a little quirky and interesting, right? But then some slightly deranged dude gets a hold of it, or a player playing a slightly deranged dude gets a hold of it, and then it tries to basically operationalize the whole thing and somehow bring down the stars, right? And it becomes this crazy thing, and it's wait, I didn't realize at the outset, and who knows, Amble probably thought of all this, but I didn't realize I could do something fun with Yog-Sothoth like this, right? But then by sort of a what if scenario basis, right, that the interaction of players with the writing and the systems and everything would allow for unforeseen and hopefully interesting alterations to the game world at a very high level that are all still somehow player based. And this criticism is still here in my head, and I can't figure it out, but it'll come to me, I hope. So someone do something.
One of the things, well, first off, I just loved being able to actually see Snipe Hunter for a change, because he's usually behind some cryptic avatar, so it's just nice to see him. One of the things that I loved about that is it kind of brought the whole team together for me, and why Metallica might or metal might be one of their strong choices for music. When I was at Activision, most of the execs were in polo shirts and khakis. They were business casual, but it was still kind of preppy. It's kind of cool to see that 15 years later, dudes are in long hair and beards and t-shirts and jeans, and that's awesome to me. Just from there, that we have a game development company where the execs are dressed like that, or leather jackets. But the other thing that was very interesting about Snipe Hunter's interview was how he talked about how creating this world, and again focusing on them really wanting to create a world, is a bunch of small systems interacting together instead of trying to create a huge weather system. They have like different, just tiny different components that interact to create an overall system that will make the world dynamic. And that's the big thing I think that we just keep talking about, is that we want these worlds to be dynamic worlds. And the reason that we can't look things up on Wiki, which we will be able to do, we will be able to know what portfolios is what we call them in D&D, the influences that the gods are interested in. We'll be able to look that up, but we won't be able to look up what their goals and objectives are each time they come down to influence the world. And that's what's going to make the whole thing dynamic, is that it's not just going to be, this is the one objective that this god is interested in, and that 10 years later he still has that exact same objective. Or, you wait, I guess it'll be 3 years until the next expansion. But, these things will be changing, month after month, instead of maybe even week after week, instead of, years.
Definitely. I think the big takeaway for me from all my interactions with Snipe Hunter over the past few weeks, because I think the written interview actually was spread out across a couple weeks, just an email chain between us, and just getting to talk to him a lot, all the different interactions, I've just gotten this huge sense of, the world is going to be just, it's not designed as this one complete thing. Like, it's not, we're not designing the world. Like, at this point, I don't even know, how terrain and all that stuff is, like, to that part, I haven't even started thinking about that part. Because to me, like, the world that that he's designing, that's only a tiny fraction of it. Like, and I feel like when you're in other games, like, the terrain is a huge portion of the world. Like, where you go, you go to a different, go to the the zones in World of Warcraft or something, and like, that's what that part of the world is, and that, like, just visually, that's what it is. And I feel like with Revival, like, the visual aspect, the terrain, that stuff doesn't even, like, count, like, it doesn't even come into the picture yet, because designing the world is so much more about, what moving parts there are, what different things are going to be affecting the player's experience, that they almost don't even, the visual design, terrain design doesn't even come into the picture yet, because that's going to be something that's likely going to be determined by all the other systems they've built anyways. They're going to, by the time they get to that point, they're going to be like, okay, well, we know this, and this all happened in this area. Artists go to town creating this region, this zone, because, and, make sure it can facilitate these different things. So that'll be something that's really interesting to see. And another thing too, technology's coming a bit further, as far as there's a couple games out there that are simulating seasonal changes. I know H1Z1 wants to do that. They have their kind of winter, spring, summer, fall type thing that they're going to be doing, and they've kind of shown different screenshots that, of things they want to do there. And I've seen other games, Diggs, I believe in Theory Forge, we were looking at Outward for just briefly, and they had this type of, you could see the snow accumulate on the ground. So I'm not sure how in depth, Snipe and the developers want to go in, as far as, simulating some actual weather and doing seasonal changes that will affect the way an environment looks. But go ahead.
But we know, even without the changes, that the temperature is going to be a factor. If you get wet, you'll be more susceptible to get diseases. You're going to have to choose what you're wearing. You're not going to be wanting to wear plate in the desert. You're not going to be wanting to wear bikinis in Sky Pass in the cold. So we know that there's going to be, it might not be to the level of snow accumulating, but we know that temperature is going to be affecting us in ways that it hasn't in past MMOs.
Yeah.
MMORPGs specifically.
And what I was kind of circling around to, the long way, as everybody probably is well aware that I tend to do all the time, but what I've gotten from Snipe Hunter from all this is, the world is so much more about what you experience and what you feel, and the systems, are changing how that affects you. and it's not about necessarily the visual anymore. Because I mean, when you go into these other MMOs, what you feel is so directly tied to what you're seeing. And I think in Revival, it's going to be a kind of flip-flopped. You know, more in what you feel is going to inform what you're seeing, rather than the other way around. Which is something that's really interesting, because there's something to be said about, you know, environmental awareness. Not the politically correct term, but, you know, being aware of your environment and the, you know, what's going on around you, having an effect on you. All of a sudden, you know, it's not just eye candy anymore. Everything you see in the world can be a key indicator of a particular system that might be in play there. You know, the temperature, humidity, you know, whatever else is going on. We probably don't even have any idea all the other. I don't know what all what all they're doing. It's so crazy just thinking of some of the few systems that'll affect your character as you know, go from different zones to other places. But yeah, I just see it as this, you know, experience. And, you know, when you're looking around the world, it's not just, oh, what did the artist think looked cool and for this particular zone that, you know, has a unique look, but it's actually something that's going to be contextual to what your character's doing there, how they're going to be affected by the place. So yeah, that's the long way around, but that's kind of what I've got from engaging with Snipes so much. And it's like, it makes me want to just, like, you know, all of us, you know, find him and corner him and just, you know, put the light in his face and just grill him on everything about this game, and what he's thinking, and to find out, you know, what it's going to be like, because, you know, what it looks like isn't as big of an important factor. However, I did want to touch in, you know, before we get to Q&A, I did want to touch in on Cliff's interview, Figment, on the art, because despite the fact that, you know, so much of the world is going to be about what you experience, you know, mechanically, and how the world's changing, the art is, you know, some of the best I've seen. Definitely very talented artists working on it, and for those of you that saw the video with Cliff, you probably get an idea of, you know, why the quality is as high as it is, because, you know, because of the way he views what he's working on, you know. And so yeah, I mean, what did you guys, after going through so many interviews the other day, I honestly don't remember all of what we talked about, but what did you guys grab from that interview? What stood out to you that you took home from it?
I'm gonna jump in. I'm laughing the whole time thinking about his interview, because you mentioned we don't know what age Kedron is, but Figment name dropped Ravenloft in the interview, like everybody knows what that is. That's cool. I mean, he is a special kind of person, special period of time to know what Ravenloft is, and expect everyone who's into any kind of RPG should know what Ravenloft is, and especially horror RPGs. But it was cool to have him do that. I liked in his piece getting down to the fine details of the artwork. He talked about how you can go into castles and older buildings in the real world, and you can see parts of the architecture that some sculpture has taken time to craft and has some special value. And he kind of tied that into relics, and ruins and relics, and building that everything on top of civilizations that have come before and have been lost to the Dark Ages. So that's another thing. I mean, archaeology is one of the things that I want to pursue in Revival, and I think that will tie in to that as well, trying to delve into the history of the world itself and find archaic lore.
Yeah, my big takeaway from Fig's interview, aside from the fact that I now want his jacket, is that I forget exactly how I worded it, but basically that at least his outlook, and I imagine it's an outlook that is generally shared among a fair number of the other, you know, I guess he's part of the content team, so I'm just going to say content team to include all the people who make, like, the actual stuff you see in the world, not the mechanics side of stuff, is that it's all designed with at least, you know, the mindset that it was designed by someone in the world, right? So that if you see architecture, if you see a painting, if you see, clothing, that it would be, as if someone in the world either had a pragmatic need for this or an aesthetic, reason or want for this thing, and that, or any combination therein, and that it all emerged out of that, and so that sort of in-world empirical-ish idea is really, it's exciting to me, because that's how I would want to do it too, right? I mean, if I were an artist, and I write a little bit, so I'm sort of going to try to write things for, revival fanfic-ish stuff that takes that same approach, but that from within the world is a good place to start for making it, I think, even though there's a little bit of a paradox there. And so I'm excited for getting a glimpse at what, by extension of observing these things that they make, what it's like to be someone in Boleston, sort of.
Yeah, definitely. I that was one part of the conversation I really enjoyed. I actually talked with Cliff for, I want to say, a good 20 or 30 minutes after the interview, just sharing ideas as artists and kind of similar backgrounds a little bit. But I really liked his kind of take about his approach for creating some of these assets that he went, he explained a little bit in the interview. But the whole idea of understanding that everything that you see in Revival is a compilation of ages of stuff, between ruins, modern stuff, different deities, different interpretations of things that people have had in the world and they built on. And I think sending that forward as we get into the later stages of Revival, as the world's expanding, we may come across ruins that have been specifically created with the pre-thought, the premeditated idea that this area may eventually be a modern city someday. So these assets being created in a modular sense that they can just keep the same visual rune type structures there and actually have a modular modern functional town built up there as the world evolves. So that was something that I got out of it from understanding the way that they approach their art, and they're creating their assets, the structures and all that. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, you guys didn't really get any glimpses of, but when I got to go inside the Revival room and kind of I got to look at everybody's monitor and kind of talk, and they, each person probably spent a few, 3, 5, 10 minutes with me talking about what they were working on. So I got to look at some of the estates, and they showed the props. I got to see the props, and the props are they're really interesting. There's such a good mix of, clean, pristine, ornate things and just dirty, grungy, and there's a good blend there to where, anything could probably fit anywhere, but you definitely have like a stark contrast in people that want to state their position or their something by, decorating their house with really fancy stuff. But then at the same time, you have people that just want the function of it, so they just have this grungy piece of crap thing because they need a place to put their books or something. So it was cool to...
I need some grungy, crappy bunk beds for the cottages, by the way. I've seen some ornate beds, but I need some crappy beds because I've got a tenement, and some of my characters are only going to be able to afford cottages, so I need some crappy stuff. And a bunk bed is one of the things I need.
I can't say I saw a bunk bed, but I definitely did see some lower class beds there. But they also had like a good variety of nice beds too, so it's going to be interesting to see how all these things get decorated, especially the estates, having it was cool to see the estates, which we have some screenshots that I cycled through the cast, and I think they posted one in the most recent blog of the estate with the stone kind of package instead of the wood, so you guys got to see a little bit of that. But that was something that was cool to see, just because seeing those statues in stone was pretty impressive from like an immersive standpoint. You go into this giant stone estate, all the stonework, and if somebody takes the time to carve something like that out of stone, like these deities, it just sends a whole new message of what's important. And it's cool too because like these estates, like Cliff was saying, have been built on some of them ruins and these statues, and they were just there. Like the people who built the estates may not even have any idea what those statues necessarily are representation of, but they're in there just because they are decoratively nice. So it's kind of cool, just adds so many layers into what they can do with places, especially that surprise stuff. Your house is haunted actually because of this, like stuff like that. So, but anyways, I do want to get to some audience questions. We are running lower on time here, so we won't be able to talk about the last video interview. But
I have to say, because
go for
he was working on the website, and the website was awesome, so I need to give him some kudos. I love just going in and looking at the map, going through and looking at the houses. That's awesome.
That's true. I definitely do have to actually, I think I did tell him, but in case I forgot to tell him, to personally thank Michael, because I totally borrowed like a ton of the site elements to create our overlay for Revivalcast, to theme it directly with the game. So you kind of built this overlay, so thank you so much. But yeah, did you have anything, Sale, on that last interview you wanted to mention? Or we'll push into...
I mean, just the Scala did some damn cool work, yo. I mean, obviously the attention to detail in the work is very high quality. I mean, this website, I mean, given the stage in the game that we're at, like, the design of this website is rather fantastic. I mean, both in terms of its usability and in terms of its graphics and how extensive it is and everything. I mean, sure, there's maybe a couple forum tricks I would like, involving extended like PHP stuff, but I mean, aside from that, like, it's great so far. Really, really impressive. Keep doing what you do, Scala.
All right, awesome. All right, so we're going to start asking some questions here. We have so many, so I know we're not going to get to all of them, but I will do my very best here. And I'm going to be trying to organize these and get them up on the stream, so I'll just be reading them to you guys primarily, and so you can answer them. So the first one we have is from, and these aren't in any chronological order. I kind of tried to move up some good ones, so I'll read them. But Cersei asked, with the different stances system, could you make a martial arts master who created his own fighting style, a la Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris? And in any question that's kind of geared towards the developers, you guys can just kind of answer what you would like to see as far as that goes.
Yeah, like I said, I'm hoping for the Drunken Monk. I think that would be fun to play. I don't know. I just don't know enough about stances to figure out our own styles. I guess some of it would be switching between lethal and non-lethal in the middle of combat. I mean, depending on who we're fighting, we might want to mix up both. So we'll just have to see. Hopefully we'll get more details on what combat will be like.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had an image of like someone switching from like an Aikido thing into like ripping someone's throat out. Mortal Kombat. I apologize, but I think within the lore, there's certainly room for certain styles to be, more rare or organically developed by individual, masters or people who sort of realized that they could do a thing. But for players, I mean, I guess maybe in a very long-term way, if there's a particularly standout player who's just very good at combat, be it PvE or PvP or what have you, and they have a particular affinity for a certain, style or approach, then, they could maybe have some sort of, loose-ish collaboration with the content team that, maybe expands some of the combat capabilities into something that would be more fitting to their style as sort of a commemoration of their dedication to getting good at the game or something like that. And this is separate from content commission. But I think really where players will be able to, sort of make a name for themselves is not so much in the use, or is not so much in a specific stance made by a player, for instance, but rather the facility to move in and out of, stances and picking, getting very good at fighting with the tools rather than making unique tools that, everyone can use, but it would still be hella cool. I mean, if someone got the chance to develop a fighting style for the game, I'd be like, yeah, all for it, right away. Get on that. But, yeah.
One of the things that has me thinking about what you said, I think, Sailkite, we talked this week about leveling systems and how that gates content in the games. We talked about that this Friday on Theory Forge. That has me thinking about something I read recently. One of the devs said somewhere that what may be getting us moving through the world, motivating us to move through the world, is finding those people who can advance our knowledge. And that had me thinking maybe some of these characters I want to stay in Crown's Rock will have to leave just so they can find a person who can give them more information. And that could tie into our stances. We may be going out for combat stances, looking for people throughout the world who have specific ways of fighting. That could be interesting.
The next one I have here is Ombwa asking us, how should developers consider the potential exploitation of death penalties, such as death for fast travel?
Well, I don't know how we're gonna do that if we're out in the spirit realm with An and Mae. I mean, I guess that depends on where we end up leaving that realm. But that's not the question. I'm going to be trying to stay dead for as long as possible. Fast travel, I mean, I'm going to be in the spirit realm. That's another place for me to explore. So I don't think that's going to help me get someplace quicker. I'm going to be staying dead. That's going to be slow travel for me.
Yeah, I mean, like the technically correct answer to this, and I think there is one, is that you should always, like, as a developer, you should always attempt to think for the potential exploitation of your mechanics, or even on whatever level, be it a high level or a low level one. I mean, for instance, in Diablo 3 recently, they patched out a particular interaction between three items, or an item, like a couple of skills in an item, that basically allowed people to go very, very far up the Greater Rift leaderboards without a lot. It was something of a stat padding thing, where like you could go much farther than you probably should have been able to by virtue of this particular loop that made you semi-invincible, and still do very good damage and things like that. So like, it's a little complicated for a game like Diablo or like Path of Exile, where you have a whole bunch of shit going on at once, and it's all very complicated, and there are interactions that are down at like hardwired code level, and it's crazy. And I would say that its resultant complexity maybe approaches, in certain ways a level that Revival will hopefully would achieve after the fact by virtue of a lot of simpler things interacting. But like development-wise, you should always understand that people will try to break your game to shit for their own benefit, and looking at it that way. But there are fun ways you can do with that. Fun ways you can advance with that. Fun things you can do. Whereby, if you know that people are going to try a particularly clear-cut interaction or thing that may seem to yield a benefit on their part, or cut out certain aspects of gameplay or whatever, or in some way get them an advantage, though in Revival what advantage means is somewhat complicated by whether you're talking at a very technical level or at a very high level, or very, very abstract level rather. But you can basically pull the devs thought of everything trick and punish them, or maybe not punish them, but you can pull an Appoggiatura and make the thing move differently from how you would expect right off the bat. That was a really complicated way of saying something really simple. I apologize.
Yeah.
Well, going back to what I said before, when I have been thinking about exploiting death, it has been specifically so that I can return to the spirit realm. I mean, I would die on purpose so I could get back to explore the spirit realm whenever I wanted to. Or I might do things to purposefully try to drive one of my characters mad, because I definitely want to have a character that does that. But one of the penalties for that, some of the penalties can be transfiguration. So if you die a certain number of times, when you come back, you're, maybe you slowly turn into a zombie, or I think there's ways to give physical penalties so that people may recognize that you've died and come back. and that might slow people down in some ways. Have people be more cautious if they don't want people to react to them as if they're a person who dies and comes back to life often.
All right, another question here. And these questions are hard, by the way, because so many are like, I think having Snipe and Envoy and all these developers awesomely hanging out in here with us is like so difficult for questions, because so many are definitely for you guys. So I'm going to just start forwarding these to Snipes and Envoy's emails. Hopefully they'll get back to you guys on them. But Serene
That
asked,
just means they need to come on more often as guests.
yeah, exactly, because then we're saving these questions. So if you guys actually, I might be asking some from past weeks, so I don't know. They're all in one place. Serene asked, though, do you think character progression should be tied to the world's geography, spreading your play experience across the world?
Depends on what you mean by progression. So, like I said, there in Revival, there may be things, there may be people that you'd want to visit in order to help give you more knowledge about whatever it is that you're interested in. And if you don't want that particular knowledge, you can stay where you are. I think people will be able to progress as far as they want to, in some ways, in Crown's Rock without ever leaving. So,
All right, I've got another question here, and this one, it's kind of, I want to kind of get your guys' opinions. Verde Manzana asks, as a Caravan Guard or Merc character, are those good ideas for becoming a badass without worry? So my way of asking you the question would be, do you think that trying to become I guess combat badass is safer by being a Caravan Guard or a Merc character comparing to, some other avenues of combat progression, maybe, I don't know, dungeon diving or something?
Not if no one ever attacks you. I mean, if you're not actively defending a caravan, right? I mean, if you never have to actually ply your trade, I mean, sure, you're standing around earning a bit of gold, right? I mean, yes, you've accomplished your task. People got from point A to point B. They did not die or lose their merchandise. Yeah, I mean, you have a technical victory. But, I mean, if your objective is to get good, or if your objective is to, in some way, elevate yourself in combat and things like that, and essentially make a name for yourself that isn't, the guy who had no one attack him for a year, then I don't really see how it would. I mean, if you are defending a particularly nasty stretch of road, I mean, e.g. Ambush Rock, right, from the blog, right, and you make it your business to support everyone who's going through there to the best of your ability, or to support anyone who would be a highwayman in that location to the best of your ability, right, and essentially make yourself not public defender, but the anti-public enemy, whatever you call that, in that zone or area, not zone, but place, then sure. I mean, because you're fighting a lot, you're actually doing something that people will talk about in the world, either as players or as characters, and then hopefully in the course of that, right, you gain the kind of experience and skill that you were hoping to gain. But otherwise, I mean, it's like, what are you doing?
I've got another one here I want to throw in. This one's also geared toward the developers, but I think we can have some fun answering it. Mother Rabbit asks, will people develop or have health issues like asthma, a bad heart, etc.? So what do you guys think about that? Should we have that kind of stuff, and what do you think it would add or create problems for in the game?
We know that we'll be getting diseases, or we can get sick from weather. We might be getting some STDs. Are those in? I can't remember. Yeah, I think they're supposed to be. They've talked about health issues. I don't know how chronic they will be, but we'll be trying to mitigate that.
So this one's a little complicated because it has to do with a certain high level thing that Envoy and Snipe care a whole damn lot about and talk about and worry about a lot, be it on the forums or in IRC or probably just with each other while they're driving home. That there's the player agency thing, but there's the matter of, can you give something serious to a player, without their consent, and is it okay? It's a shitty choice of words. I apologize. But basically, at character creation, it's one thing, right? Like, you're going to get certain attributes if you want to be a really smart mage, badass guy, and you have a certain background that you created through the character creation matrix, and you know that your health is probably going to be a little frail, right? It just it doesn't necessarily make sense always, but it follows that one could put that on you as a penalty, or not a penalty, but a consideration to weigh the options for. But for something that happens out in the world, right? Sure, you can maybe place certain things, within reason. Like, if it looks like there's a whole bunch of dead things in there that are still decaying, you maybe don't want to go in that cave because you might catch some sort of nasty bug. But how to, in situations where it's not completely obvious that you would get sick, and not completely obvious that you're making a deliberate trade-off that you have information of. Basically, if it's not a complete information game, to bring that sort of perspective in on it, then is it okay to do these things? And if it is okay to give players this sort of impedance, then how do you implement it? And I don't know the answers to either of these off the top of my head. I'd have to think about it for a long time. But all
right, and to close out, I've got one question I think is a good one to end on. I'm going to have to completely reword it because I think I understand what it's asking. So I'm just going to simplify it for you guys. But it's a big one by Totem, and he is asking, basically, is Revival going to be a game that is geared mainly for long-term players, or will there be things in the game that will encourage players to play on more of short-term bases? And I'm not sure that's necessarily asking about session length, but about if you're going to have players make small commitments or large commitments to the game. So you guys can take that and go wherever you want with it. He brings up nerfing, but I'm not sure that'll have a heavy effect because of the way the game's combat and all that kind of stuff is, that nerfing will be too much of an issue of whether people want to commit to the game or not. But yeah, go ahead and take that one and run with it. I'll probably chime in at the end as well too. Either one? Okay, I'll go then. Alright, so I feel like Revival's being built up as an immersive world that, you're inside, you're exploring and stuff. I feel like to really achieve the highs of the high in this game, it probably does require some amount of significant commitment to it. Not necessarily, 4 hours a day or anything like time, but actually committing to being a part of the game for an extended period of time, a few months or something, to finally kind of figure your way around, learn maybe Crown's Rock or whatever area you end up starting in at whatever stage of the game that is, finding out who's who, developing because I feel like this game adds a lot of social dynamics into things, of understanding who your neighbors are, and that isn't, in this game, that isn't just players. Like, learning who the NPCs are, what they do every day, is actually an important part of this game. It's not like you have, Jaina, whatever, the Archmage, and she's always in, this particular place. These NPCs will be living and changing and doing things. So for you to kind of even have any sense of where you are in the world, I'd imagine there's some amount of learning that will be required and commitment to, playing the game. So in that sense, I think that this game is probably more geared towards people that are into a longer experience. But I think, that being said, I think that that's kind of a given in the fact that, even single-player RPGs are pretty time-intensive. Most of them expect the player to play, 80 to 120 hours of game time, especially the sandbox ones, especially, that's probably the bare minimum that people put into the, like, Skyrim or something. Most people play a lot of that, especially if they want to experience all the different, avenues of progression that they can do, or the different areas of the world. So I feel like it's geared more towards a longer player and a bigger commitment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you can only play 2 hours a week that you're not going to have fun doing so. But it definitely might be hard to keep up with the world, depending on what server you're in and how active it is. So,
Diggs, do you want to go?
Yeah, I come into games, MMORPGs, expecting that I'm going to play that one game forever. And I usually don't because at some point I hit a wall where everything's repetitive, whether that's that I've reached a hell level and I'm banging on the same mobs and can't kill them fast enough to get experience in a reasonable amount of time, so I get bored and move on. Or you reach an end game and you're stuck with dailies. In an evolving online world where I'm going to be on the storyteller servers, if they have real people that we can interact with and have conversations about the changes going on in the world, I think you stay for as long as it's interesting. But it should be fairly interesting to be able to jump in and talk about who's mayor this week versus who was mayor 2 months ago, or what the gods are doing, whose house got stomped on. I mean, there should be all kinds of stuff to talk about. We should be making an impact on the world. The NPCs will be changing and reacting to what's happening in the world, and the storytellers will be impacting the world too. So unless we don't have emergent AI and everything is static, and unless we don't have storytellers actually in the game, then yeah, we could probably see stuff like Wildstar, where you jump in and jump back out quickly. But that's not what Revival's trying to be.
I mean, I know, or rather my personal appraisal is that Revival ultimately will reward most those who stick with it the longest. Or perhaps with the most degree of investment and time combined, right? Like as a multiplicative factor thing. But I think it's okay if people come to it on something of an itinerant or a near return basis. Come into the game, try it, get started with a couple friends who can give them a hand in terms of understanding what they want to do or try for the first bit. Play it for 3 months. Say this has been fun, but it's not the thing I'm looking for or whatever, because some people do just want a thing they can log into as a routine with friends and stuff like that. But I think that's still okay, because for the 3 months that they did play, they still created happenings and influence in the world by virtue of doing whatever it was that they chose to do. And almost by a similar extension, their not being in the world creates an influence. It's a little more complicated, and it depends on the particular case, but it does happen, right? Or rather, one could imagine it happening. So, while I would, hope that people stay long term, and hope that a really, really thick braid of intense stuff goes on over a very long time, not everyone has to experience that. Eve makes great news, even though only 50k people play.
Yeah. Well, good answers, you guys. I think a lot of the audience here has been also chiming in chat, especially the developers too, on that one. I think it was a pretty big question, is, defining what Revival is. It's still early on, but I think what this game is trying to be is pretty well out there, especially if you want to, dig around for the information. You don't even really have to dig. Feeling around for all the information, there's so much about this game that that's out there on the forums and on the main website, and many past episodes. Well, not many. There's 10 past episodes of Revivalcast that we have, and the developers themselves have their own stream that has hour-long bits. I think they have 4 or 5 of them so far. So you can definitely get your fill of information about this, and in the event that you can consume all of that, you'll have a very good understanding of what this game is trying to be, what it is shaping up to be already, and what the developers are trying to do with all this. So, and with that being said, I think that's kind of the end here of our show today. It's been 2 hours of fun. We actually have gone almost 20 minutes over now, just because there was so much to talk about, and we had so many questions I couldn't even ask. But hopefully the developers were chiming in on those as you guys were asking them in the chat. So hopefully since we didn't get to them, you guys were still able to get some form of an answer out of them that you liked. But otherwise, we really appreciate you guys coming back for another week. We missed last week, but our plan is to be weekly still every time, as long as there's stuff to talk about, which there never seems to be a shortage of thus far. So we're still planning to keep doing this. I would expect the same cast next week. We may have Astral back. Cecira's still gone for a while. And so that being said, we haven't been doing the book reading thing, and I may start up a forum version of that, but we also might just reserve that for weeks of, if the information is a little bit thinner coming out from the team. So, but yeah, definitely come back next week. Chime in. You guys can actually submit questions on theoryforge.tv as well during the middle of the week if you wanted to ask us in the next episode, or maybe even plan some of our episode around topics like that. So definitely go to theoryforge.tv and submit those. Other words, we will call it here. And I did Sale, Diggs, did you guys have any last things you wanted to say for the week? Okay, so but thanks, you guys. We will catch you next week, same time, same place. Thanks for I do want to personally thank Ilphonic and the developers for inviting me out and giving me the opportunity to share all that information with everyone, as well as coming in and showing up in the chat every week. I mean, half our questions are asked directly to you guys, so that just is a testament to how regular you guys are and participating in the community, especially at this show. So we want to thank you guys for that, and we're looking forward to more interactions and seeing more as you guys reveal your magical wonderland to us. So thanks you guys so much, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye.